Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. So I'm going to present today from a forthcoming paper from my work on the politics of municipal garbage collection in Dakar, Senegal. And my overall goal here is to argue that social and bodily technologies must be included as key elements within a wider gamut of techniques constituting urban infrastructure, through literally fleshing out the living parts of labor and community in infrastructural systems. Talking about infrastructures of labor helps us to get at all of the ways that governmental power can be exerted through infrastructures, because they often crystallize uneven development, unjust power relations, and even exploitative conditions in the city. But infrastructures also serve as key sites of debate and contestation around the rights and rewards of the city, and the insurgent politics that may arise as people rebel through infrastructure. So these are the two sort of general points that I want to make in this presentation. But I'm particularly concerned with politicizing the fabric of the city through emphasizing materiality, or the matter at stake in infrastructure, garbage in this instance, in all of its multiple dimensions. I understand infrastructure, drawing on Michelle Murphy, not as a neutral supporting structure, but as a multidimensional set of relational properties that become an ecology of infrastructure. Infrastructures are spatial arrangements of relationships that draw human beings, things, words, and non-humans into patterned conjunctures. So this vital materialist understanding draws our attention to how the development, operation, and maintenance of infrastructure are intensely entangled with other spheres. And we'll see that the political and the religious spheres are important in this example. So just to give you a little bit of background, my research from which this is drawn examines the cultural politics of municipal garbage collection over the last 25 years in Dakar. And there are sort of three key elements, and I'm just going to very briefly talk about these, characterizing what has been a very sort of volatile political moment of garbage politics during this time. So the first is that this time has seen countless institutional reorganizations in the institutions charged with managing the city's trash. You don't have to pay too much attention to this graph. You just need to know that this represents the institutional reorganizations that have happened just over the last 20 years or so. And those have ranged from full privatization to full nationalization to a whole host of different sort of hybrid arrangements in between. It's been a very sort of volatile institutional time in terms of the organizations charged with managing the city's garbage. Also during this time, there have been frequent and prolonged garbage strikes. This is one strike that took place in 2013, I believe, by the Union of Trash Workers of Dakar. And I'm going to talk a bit more about those trash strikes later. But thirdly, this time has been characterized by widespread concerted acts of public dumping. And by public dumping, what I mean is whole neighborhoods of people actually leaving their homes to dump their trash in the street in solidarity with the striking trash workers. So the confluence of these three very intense, volatile, and very stinky, as you might imagine, sort of movements around the politics of garbage have made this a really sort of intensely remarkable time. And the backdrop, and again, I can't get into this in detail here, is neoliberal urban reform in the wake of structural adjustment. But neoliberal urban reform taking place in the context of a very vibrant democratic politics. In Dakar, Senegal is a very vibrant democratic political scene, but Dakar is the heartland of that democratic politics. So waste in this context has taken center stage in both reform strategies and the politics that they precipitate. So my first point is about governing through garbage. I argue that over this period, differentially disciplining people through waste and the particular burdens of waste disposal has been a central mode of state power in Senegal. At the base of the volatile contestations and institutional reorganizations around municipal garbage has been labor, or labor politics. from the founding of the contemporary trash system in a volunteer social movement to continued efforts to undermine unionization, new low-tech infrastructural formulas have aimed to flexibilize labor through a range of discourses and technologies of participation. In so doing, they have re-spatialized the relations of social reproduction and thereby devolved the burdens of doing the dirty work more firmly onto social systems and bodies, particularly youth and women. For ordinary Dakarois, this has meant an increasingly challenging burdens of managing waste in the home, which in Senegal is generally filled with mainly organic matter, which in this hot climate gets very sticky and messy very quick. As a result, the poorest neighborhoods pay the most for garbage collection and become the most encumbered by garbage and the noxious dangers of waste, pollution, and disease. For workers, the flexibilization of labor conditions and inadequate remuneration has meant increasingly precarious working conditions. So before I change slides, I just want to point out that this is a very sort of intentional juxtaposition here, which if you're a scholar of Senegal, or if you've been to Senegal, and I know some of you have, represents sort of a lot of what I'm trying to get at here with the governing garbage argument. So you've got some women walking in front of a dépôt sauvage or a sort of dump, informal trash dump, representing the sort of inability of the collection circuit to work in this particular neighborhood. But in the background, you have this incredible statue, and this is when it was still underway, that represents sort of all of the hubris that was associated with the past president, the President Abdoulaye Wade, who was in charge of Senegal from 2000 to 2012. And so his sort of idea of infrastructure is very much seen as kind of this elitist vision that didn't actually represent the needs of people in Senegal, as sort of symbolized by this really, really ugly statue that everybody hates, and the sort of inability to actually provide urban public services for the residents of Dakar. So garbage workers have borne the brunt of this labor-intensive infrastructure through the onerous demands of the work itself, associated diseases, and the stigma of laboring in filth. The materiality of the labor process matters for the bodies of the workers doing the dirty work. Generally lacking in protective clothing and proper equipment, they stand nakedly exposed to an array of harms and shoulder disproportionate burdens of disease. So here's an example of the material intimacy this precipitates between workers and the machines that they depend on. The central pillar of the material technology of this system is the garbage truck, but trucks are a rickety, dilapidated material scaffolding. Most arrive used from Europe, already in disrepair, and once put to work in Senegal, they face the wear and tear caused by poor roads, lack of maintenance, and overcharged loads. The disintegration of the infrastructure steel precipitates incessant expert physical labors of salvage bricolage. Like bricoleurs all over the continent, trash workers have no choice but to transform someone else's rubbish infrastructure into new utility. These workers are infrastructure hackers, manipulating the system's steel architecture through fastening their own bodies to the truck's dysfunctional steel plates. The bodies and the machines conform to each other's labors as the workers employ their own arms as artificial limbs for the ailing trucks. The dangers of such intimacy are cleanly written on the bodies of the collectors in their scars, bruises, even missing limbs. My point here is that far from becoming more high-tech, many infrastructures, particularly in the global south, are being devolved onto labor, and thereby burden certain people with the work of building and maintaining the city. In Dakar, this is the product of a particular confluence of the logics of austerity and political contestation at the urban level. In that context, labor-intensive participatory waste infrastructures have come to be a central pillar of governing practices forged through the literal emplacement of burdens of disease and dirt onto specific bodies and spaces. This history of flexibilization of labor in Dakar underscores what Cindy Katz has called the fleshy, messy aspects of the crisis of social reproduction as it operates through the burdens of labor's materiality. Just as new advanced technologies reconfigure social relations, so do gaps in infrastructure and the devolution to lower technologies operate as means of control. This, of course, has not gone uncontested. So the second point I want to make here is that the intimacy among workers, residents, and waste's materiality provides the grounds on which to mobilize claims for improved urban labor conditions and public services. So the trash workers of Dakar formed a labor union in 2000, and in 2006 began striking quite vociferously, using the general trash strike, where they stopped picking up the city's trash, as their main lever to voice their grievances about poor remuneration, lack of contracts, and lack of benefits. Through this process, they've actually become one of the most visible unions in contemporary Senegal, and they have inspired these sort of neighborhood trash revolts through which whole neighborhoods have dumped their own trash in solidarity with the workers. So workers and residents in Dakar have exerted their rights to urban citizenship through creatively manifesting disorder to contest the governing prerogatives of government officials and all of the associated dimensions of stigma and abjection implied by living and working in filth. Through intentionally externalizing private trash into public spaces, they deploy the power of dirt to unsettle the ordering paradigms implied by participatory labor arrangements, to argue for a sort of garbage citizenship that includes fair remuneration and benefits for garbage labor and affordable, accessible garbage services. These claims to garbage citizenship have, in turn, provided a language to contest uneven infrastructures and the flexibilization of labor in Dakar in general. Beyond their power as a lever of contestation, Dakar's strikes reveal the social infrastructure that binds the workers together. I just want to point out that this is the leader of the Municipal Trash Workers Union, Madanisi, who's a very sort of charismatic, kind of organic intellectual. And he has, at his helm, the union has managed to sort of catapult the vision of the union to the forefront of a lot of political debates, but also it's been sort of in the presses quite a bit over the last 12 years. But in the context of their profound insecurity, one is struck by the workers' intense camaraderie and solidarity. In many instances, groups of workers band together to help out a colleague in need through picking up the slack on the job or helping out with medical bills. But the trash workers' solidarity is also buttressed by something else: their common faith and conviction that the labor of cleaning the city is a pious act. Undergirding the shared material and labor infrastructure of garbage collection is an architecture of faith that gives the movement its moral authority. If cleanliness is godliness, they argue, then those who work day in and day out to purge Dakar of its impurities should be rewarded in the here and now for this noble deed. The reward due is simple: respect, job stability, and fair pay. In this way, the workers turn the stigma of trash work on its head. Forging an understanding of trash work as a service of purification validates their labor and creates a platform for making claims on the state in an era when politicians are strongly distrusted, but where faith and communal religious identity remains an enormous personal and collective resource. And since 2009, they've actually gained a number of key concessions, including formal contracts and benefits, including medical coverage and sick pay. And then last summer of 2014, they actually formed a collective bargaining agreement with the mayor of Dakar. So that was like a huge win. So to conclude, I want to just emphasize how the case of garbage in Dakar makes clear how we have to think about all of the dimensions of infrastructure. Beyond just trucks and the city dump, infrastructures of disposal are comprised of a complex ecology of material objects and human labor, tethered together through their affective registers, architectures of faith, and political actualities. The politics of garbage in Dakar reveals that the things, living bodies, and values that make up trash infrastructures can operate as performative vehicles of emergent agendas of both governing and rebellion. I've focused here on labor's materiality in order to probe the burdens of infrastructure. Discard labor, in particular, crystallizes the value work manifested in structures of vulnerability. It also raises all manner of critical questions for the deployment of discourses of participation and community in practices of governing. Laid bare are the particularly dirty contradictions ushered forth in the era of austerity. The burdens of participation and bricolage are borne on workers' bodies in the scars, impurities, and stigmas they carry along. But the vibrant struggles around garbage in Dakar also illuminate a potent example of how degraded or discarded subjects critique the expert knowledge complicit in their own subjugation. Waste's powers to disrupt and the salience of its opposite, cleanliness, as a symbol of faith and piety, motivates collective attachments of all kinds in all sorts of unpredictable ways. Perhaps the most important lesson to learn from Dakar's trash workers, then, is their battle to make their labor manifest or visible and to sculpt a vernacular understanding of its worth. In so doing, they demand a remoralization of work and stake claims for a more ethical urban infrastructure. Thank you.